Good morning, listeners.
We will be joined this morning by very special guests who will walk side by side with us today. We have with us Dr. Paul Andrew Gwaza. Dr. Paul is an expert in conflict, peace, and security. He is also a senior researcher at the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution. Dr. Paul, you're welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah. Later on in the show, we will be joined by Assistant Inspector General Yerima, retired. Now, our guest will give us useful insights on some headlines of interest and also help us unpack the theme for today's show. Our theme for today is Herders and Farmers Conflict in Nigeria. As usual, we shall begin with our side stories. Father Robert, I'm sure you have interesting or rather helpful stories, especially on the domestic scene. Father Robert, over to you, please.
Chiedu, once again, good morning and good morning, listeners. Today we'll do home stories all through, and there are a host of them indeed. The first is on energy security, and it says diesel price may hit 1,500 naira per liter. 75% filling stations closed. That's according to marketers, and you'll find that in the Punch newspaper. The next is on technology, judiciary, and crime. And this one says court sentences Mama Boko Haram, 2 others to prison over 71.4 million naira fraud. You'll find the story in the Daily Post newspaper. Also, man jailed 2 months for raising false alarm on Facebook, according to the Daily Trust. Now, just a little detail to that story. The Department of State Security, DSS, had arrested Habibu Achille Rabiu and charged him to court over his comment on Facebook that said, I quote, "The rate at which fever is killing people in Kogi State is alarming." Rabiu, during the heat of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country, made this post on his Facebook page. He was charged with the offense of spreading false information, quote, capable of causing panic or inflicting injuries to the society. And now a magistrate court sitting in Lokoja has given him this sentence. This next set of headlines border on governance, public policy, and group advocacy, and they all border on security. This one says 31 policemen dismissed, others sanctioned over 14,976 complaints. That's according to the Punch newspaper. 14,976 complaints. That's rather so many complaints.
And just 31.
Are you complaining? Maybe more are being investigated, we do not know, but this is a positive development, I must say. If law enforcement officers run foul of their rules of conduct, then something has to be done about it, especially in order to build public trust in these institutions. So this next headline says, autonomy for local government will bring an end to insecurity, others. And that's according to the clerk of the Kano State House of Assembly and head of Legislative Service, Garba Bako Gezawa. And you find the story in the Vanguard newspaper. Another says, federal government mom as colleges of education lecturers begin strike. You find that in the Punch newspaper. ASU is on strike, now colleges of education. Wow. So this next headline says, Christians, churches now targets of terrorists. That's according to IPOL, and you find that in Punch newspaper. Still in the Punch newspaper, strengthen worship centers, security. Kwara police tells clerics. We also have stories on environmental security and climate change. So, Sokoto State Emergency Management Agency, SEMA, inspects Sokoto community as windstorm destroys houses. You find that in the Punch newspaper. Still in the Punch newspaper, Red Cross warns against rising global heat wave. That must be because of the depletion of the ozone layer, right? Chiedu, you drove your car to come to office. You have to start trekking to office now so that you don't damage our climate.
Okay. Yeah, then we should have more bicycles on the road.
Of course, in many countries now they use bicycles, but how is that feasible in Nigeria, in Abuja?
Of course it's feasible because it's a business opportunity. Get the bicycles, and then put them out there for lease.
Try that tomorrow when you come to the radio station. Okay, another set of headlines. This one's border on drug law enforcement, human trafficking and anti-corruption. And the first says, Oshun, ICPC launched anti-corruption clubs in 68 schools. You find that interesting story in the Punch newspaper, and it concerns schools that are both private owned and public owned, and they are secondary schools. They want to begin the anti-corruption spirit to get it rooted in secondary school pupils. That's an interesting development.
Catch them young.
Catch them young.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And another says Marwa commends IGP over NDLEA police partnership, according to the Punch newspaper. That partnership is very important because much of crime that we see around is driven by drugs. So if you cut the chains of drug supplies, you are able to also temper down the escalation of insecurity in society, especially violent crime. This one says 16,799 kg illicit drugs destroyed in Oyo. That's in the Daily Trust newspaper.
Just one state.
One state. Just one state.
16,000 kilograms.
Yes.
Then that should give us concern.
By the way, Ondo State has some sections. Ondo State has some sections that have cannabis farms. Edo State has some sections adjoining the southwest where you have tobacco being grown, and it is not normal tobacco, the one we know.
Yeah.
It is the other tobacco. And all of these feed into the crime wave that we are witnessing in different parts of the country. Where you have these things growing, you also have gangs who are trying to outbid one another.
And you marry that to schools, especially tertiary institutions that are now going on strike. And then you have a combustible mixture. Students.
You are scaring me now.
No. That's part of what I mean. Students staying at home, and then these illicit drugs that actually drive crimes and criminality. So you cannot begin to see the reason why we need to get it fixed, both in getting our students back to school and the security agencies, especially NDLEA, rooting out those who farm or produce illicit drugs. We must deal with them.
Dr. Paul, you work with the Institute for Conflict and for Peace and Conflict Resolution, and you have been working on these things for so many years. How important is the effort to control the spread of drugs, to curbing criminality?
There's no doubt that there's connection between drugs and crime and insecurity, and indeed in the escalation of violent conflicts in the country. So if you are looking at the connection, there is no doubt that if you are able to tackle the issue of drug abuse, or whether it is drug proliferation or drug trafficking, then you will significantly would have addressed or mitigated the spread of violent conflicts, because just as you rightly alluded to, when you have significant number of the young people staying at home, they are idle. They say the idle mind or the idle hand is the devil's workshop. So where significant number of young people are idling about because not because of their own design, but because the system has made it in such a way that we are not being able to meet all the demands of lecturers, so they've been home for close to 4 to 6 months. That is just one stretch. Apart from the ones that have been taking place before now, you will definitely have built a number of soldiers that will be used for insecurity, whether it is for crime or it is for violent conflict. So once we're able to address the issue of crimes, we will have significantly reduced it, but it does not mean that we would have curtailed the problem. Because the problem is that these people are idle. They just resort to the use of drugs because they don't have things to do. So drugs is just one component of it. It's just a precipitant. It's used to motivate people to carry out what they have intended in their mind. So the same thing with arms. So drugs and arms go hand in hand. So, and you know, even in the traditional setting, for you to be able to carry out certain nefarious activity, you need to be high.
Yeah.
You want to kill, you need to be on drugs. You want to commit certain offense, you want to take certain enhancers. And even ritual killing. So you need to take. So once we do that, we would have reduced to some extent, but we wouldn't have addressed the foundation. Drugs is not at the root cause of these things. There are other factors that if you want to look at that are the root cause of conflicts and insecurity. So drugs is just a trigger, a motivator to insecurity.
You know, as we were talking about what drugs do in the web of crime, I was just thinking, Karl Marx said that religion is the opium of the masses. I was just thinking maybe drugs is the opium of the idol.
but even within the thinking of Karl Marx is that it then makes the masses to be docile. It's supposed to be that they are docile, but within the context of what we are witnessing, drugs is not making these young people to be docile. It's in fact making them to be very active. It fires them.
I have put myself in trouble now.
So that is just the...
All right, let's move on to terrorism, banditry, kidnapping, and other violent crimes. And the first story I should take here concerns a rather sad event that occurred in Benue State. On Sunday, June the 12th of 2022, which was Nigeria's Democracy Day, gunmen suspected to be killer headsmen struck Igama Edumoga Ehaje in Opoku local government area of Benue State, killing at least 30 persons. The criminals attacked in the early hours of the day, killing residents and burning buildings to the ground. To make sure the public is well informed, we decided that on this show today we will speak with Lieutenant Colonel Paul Hemba. He's the special advisor on security matters to the governor of Benue State. Let's make the call, please. Okay, just keep trying. So we are aiming to speak with Lieutenant Colonel Paul Hemba, who is the special advisor on security matters to the Benue State Governor for Otum, Governor Samuel Otum, I beg your pardon. While we try to reach him on phone, we continue with the other headlines. And there is this one from the Daily Trust that says, okay. Hello, good morning, sir. Good morning, Colonel Paul. This is Side by Side, and you are live on the program today. We must first of all begin by commiserating with the people of Edumoga Ehaje in Opoku local government area, the people of Benue State, and very importantly, the government of Benue State over this very sad, dastardly attack on the people of Okpoko local government. Please accept our sincere sympathies, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We thank you for accepting to speak with us on this platform. We would like to first of all ask what exactly happened, because when events like this take place, you have people who throw out all kinds of narratives, and sometimes people get misled. So can you give us what we may consider the facts of what took place on Sunday?
On Sunday, there was an attack on that community association in the local government. Early hours of Sunday, and 12 people were killed. The whole community was burnt down by suspected armed herdsmen. But very importantly, a day before that, precisely the night of Saturday,
Yes.
at about 10 p.m., I received a security report that indicated a planned attack on that community. And the specific name of the Ardu of Fulani in that area, Ardu was mentioned as the mastermind of the impending attack. And because I know him, I put a call across to him immediately that night.
Okay.
And I called him that I had just received the security reports indicating a planned attack, an impending attack on those communities. And most worrisome is the fact that his name was mentioned as the mastermind.
Wow.
He denied knowledge of any such planned attack. And I extracted commitment from him. I told him that it's okay, since you have denied knowledge of anything like that, talk to your people. You are the leader of the Fulanis in that community. Talk to them in order to avert such attack. Otherwise, we will hold you responsible, because the security report is specific. You are mentioned as the mastermind. He called me 30 minutes after that and told me that he was in Makoti, but that he had already reached out to his people on phone and gave me the assurances that nothing of such will take place. But unfortunately, by early hours of that Sunday, we witnessed this very devastating attack on that community. So I called him immediately that what I told him and the assurances he gave me, the attack is ongoing, and what does he have to say about it? He still denied knowledge of the ongoing attack, and he told me that he was on his way from Makoti to Opoku, and that when he gets to the ground, he will call me back, and I never heard from him again. So the security agency who got this report have invited him for questioning. He's currently with them, and he's being questioned as regards the attack. So that's what happened.
Okay, when it comes to Benue State, there have been so many attacks. Not too many times have we seen people being invited for questioning, I must say. But in this particular occurrence, someone has been invited for questioning. do you have any indications that these questionings will gradually unravel those behind this attack and they will be brought to book? Because still in Benue State, one of the things that sociopolitical analysts and people who have paid interest, some interest in developments around the insecurity in Benue State have observed consistently is that justice is usually not seen to have been done. So do we have some assurance that in this particular case, since you had intelligence and this thing has happened, it will go in the direction that many expect it should go?
Hopefully, yes. We have confidence in the police and the way they are handling the investigation so far. And we are hoping that justice will be done. The Ardo will be prosecuted along with his accomplices. Because the security report was specific. It mentioned him as the mastermind. And he gave us the date that the action was going to be taken from 12th of this month. And just that date and early hours of that Sunday morning, it happened. Despite my calling him and warning him and the assurances he gave me.
Okay.
So we have strong reason to believe that he has knowledge of the attack.
Thanks for this insight. But unfortunately, lives are already lost. 12 for that matter. I mean,
30.
13.
30 lives.
30 lives. Now, intelligence serves two purposes. Okay, it helps bring those who are culpable to justice. But it is also meant to help prevent or blunt an impending attack. One wonders, should something have been done to ensure that the targeted places or supposedly targeted places should have been secured before an attack occurs, so that this loss of lives can be prevented?
Yes, but you see, at this point, I, for one, will not blame the security agencies for not preventing the attack, because the names of 3 communities were listed for the planned attack. And we informed them that night. The intelligence got to me at about 10:30 p.m. in the night. And after visiting the location day before yesterday after the attack with the deputy governor, I appreciated the difficulty in assessing the community. The security agencies, it would have been very difficult for them to assess that place in the night, as it were. Even in the daytime, we got into a lot of difficulty getting to the location. It's very remote in the forest, and the community had no chance of putting up any defense. It was difficult to even direct the security agency to get there in the daytime, talkless of the night. So the reaction time for the security agencies actually was really very short. What we're talking about was 10 p.m. when I got this report, and by around 4 a.m. the attack had started. So just few hours to the incident.
Yeah, okay, thanks. We appreciate this effort, but I mean, nobody can master these localities more than the indigenous themselves. Was any effort made to actually alert these communities?
Yes, actually the vigilantes there on their own, they don't stand a chance against the sophisticated weapons deployed by the herdsmen. They came with AK-47 rifles. The vigilante there, and they also came in overwhelming numbers from what we heard. The the vigilante in that remote community are very limited in number, and all they were carrying were machetes and locally made den guns. They stood no chance whatsoever.
Okay. Well, I mean, on a final note, any progress made in mopping up the arms and ammunition used in these attacks?
Well, for now, the military, in conjunction with the police, are still combing the bushes, with the hope that if there are any hidden weapons in the bushes, or any of the herdsmen still lurking in the bushes, they will be flushed out. So the effort is still ongoing.
Okay. I would like to ask, in situations like this, the aftermath of attacks like this, governments usually worry about how to ameliorate the sufferings that the people will be going through. Benue State is already a place where you have internally displaced persons camps littered here and there. The numbers are swelling. This may eventually add to those numbers. So is there any relief package that the government is designing for the victims of this attack and the many people who surely have been displaced by this attack?
Yeah, like I told you, the entire community was almost completely burnt down. The survivors have no shelter. They have run to a neighboring community to find shelter there. The state government is already working on a program to establish a temporary shelter for them. Meanwhile, the deputy governor, as I told you,
Yes.
visited the place, and he made donations for the provision of food items to cater for the displaced person as immediate relief. More efforts are being made in that regard.
Okay. Permit me to ask you about Katsinala and Logo local government areas of Benue State. We understand that there are some levels of insecurity in parts of those local governments that are worrisome. And some indicate that some criminal gangs are responsible for the Benue State government led by Governor Samuel Otom and Aso Villa, which is the seat of federal power in Nigeria, do not have the best of relationship, and that is to put it very mildly. Samuel Otom has said this himself. Is there a sense in which one might wonder that that strained relationship is impacting the efforts of the government in dealing with insecurity?
Yes, but at the same time, you see, we must commend the federal government for establishing a military task force known as Operation Wise 2. And this was in response to repeated cries from the state governor about the state of affairs in Benue. The task force is doing a lot of work. We have achieved quite a lot in restoring peace, in wiping out banditry, and containing the herdsmen attack. So we must commend the federal government. The governor himself has given kudos to the president in that regard. In addition to that, the state government itself is in the process of establishing a volunteer guard, state volunteer guards, to complement the efforts of these conventional security agencies that are controlled by the federal government. I'm talking about the military and the police. These volunteer guards hopes they will be trained and equipped with legal weapons to assist and complement the efforts of these conventional security agencies.
Oh, thank you very, very much. The volunteer guards will be some sort of force multiplier to the conventional security forces that we have on the ground. We must thank you very sincerely, Lieutenant Colonel Paul Hemba, Special Advisor on Security Matters to the Governor of Benue State. Thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
So that was the Special Advisor on Security Matters to the Governor of Benue State. This is one of those rare occasions where you are hearing that before the attack took place, there was no intelligence failure. Maybe it is in the response that questions may be raised, but they had reliable information that this was going to happen. Dr. Paul, you visit communities that experience things like this. You have been part of researching on motives for things like this. You've been part of investigating the impact or assessing impact of things like this. You heard of this attack in Oboko local government in Benue State, and what came to your mind really?
You know, the problem is that we're dealing with a hydra-headed conflict situation, and so it manifests in diverse forms. So it's the ability of the state to understand that you are dealing with a hydra-headed problem. And so the state in literature is described as a leviathan, and leviathan is a spiral hydra-headed monster. The intention is that the state should equally have the capacity to deal with this hydra-headed security challenge. And so when I was hearing the senior special advisor talking about a particular leader, and he being the intelligence that flagged off, indicating that there's going to be this attack, and you dissipate, or let me say you push in all the state effort in arresting this particular individual. It shows that you're so sure that is the person. But that is the nature of conflicts across the country, because the actors of terror in Nigeria are so many and they are not coordinated. It's not that when you are dealing with one particular group of terror, you think that it is that one that we have seen it even with the Boko Haram, the power tussle within the Boko Haram. So it shows that even within the Boko Haram, there are many leadership, and there's no one person that can give order, or there's not only one person that you can say you are engaging in dialogue with. So the point I'm making is that once there is an early warning that there is an attack that is about to take place, and a name is flagged up, don't be raised assured that it is that person that will carry out the attack.
Exactly.
So this is there's a multi-dimensional set of insecurity problem that we are confronted with, and it is because this issue has festered for a very long period of time, and our Leviathan, the state, has not been able to address it squarely. Now, the point is that let's take the attack on Benue that has happened as a case study. My expectation is that once there is an early warning indication that there's going to be an attack on community A, the state is supposed to deploy all resources within its purview to ensure prevention. And thank God you flag up the issue of the imperative of such early warning, that once it is to prevent, and once you are also, another thing is that you ensure that you arrest the persons or the culprits involved. And in the context of what happened in Benue, we have not been able to do either. We have not been able to prevent. We have just arrested somebody who there is prima facie case that is going to drag into a whole lot of legal tussle in the court. At the end of the day, I'm sure, except for your early warning document or early warning signal, there is nothing to tender to hold this guy accountable. So at the end of the day, we have not been able to, number one, even hold the perpetrators. And another question that came out from it also is that now if we're alleging that these people came with weapons, AK-47, it's not that we have been able to pick any exhibit, whether we have been able to say, okay, these people, we have killed one, we have killed two, and so these are the exhibits that they left behind. We have not been able to do that. So my point is that I think that we have a lot of things to do. We have flagged up the issue of drugs. There are many other things that needed to be done. I am expecting that with this challenge that Benue State has been going through for this while, I expect Benue State to have been able to map communities in the state, and then to be able to equally map to know what communities are at high risk. We mentioned Logo and Testinala. Those communities have been under the heavy hand of terror for a long time. And there hadn't been any significant mapping to see, okay, these communities under threat, what are the strategies to ensure prevention? What are the strategies to mitigate these threats that these communities are facing? Equally, communities in the Idoma axis also are being confronted with heavy threats by terror. You know that those communities in Idoma side are closer to Kogi, where the Ansaruddin have been operating over a long period of time. And so you should expect as a government that these terror elements will cross over to terrorize those communities. So the thing that I'm expecting is that there should be sanity. Politics apart, partisanship shouldn't transcend certain key issues of life about survival of people, security of life and property. And the question you raise about the relationship between the Benue State government and the federal government is very important. And thankfully, the senior special advisor to the government of security addressed it also professionally to the extent that the federal government has done something. But I think it should go beyond that. Apart from the fact that I hear him mentioning local vigilante. I think the threats that the communities in Nigeria are confronted with, I think 2 years ago we did an engagement about safe community. And what we discover is that virtually all communities in Nigeria are under threat. Because number one, whether you like it or not, most of our communities are emerged out of a farm setting. They are originally farm settlement, and then grew over a period of time to become indeed towns or even cities as we have them now. So what you expect is that they are deep down into the bush. And so if government officials are saying, for instance, I make bold to say that if you're a government official and you're telling me that these communities are inaccessible, I wonder what is it that you're saying? That over a period of time you have not constructed roads, local government are not functioning, the states are not functioning, they can't even construct roads to a community that is under threat, assuming that the threat is just coming. I know that those communities there, because this is actually a very serious thing, and unless and until our citizens begin to know that government is supposed to do serious business, people are supposed to engage in serious business once they're in government. And the serious business is that, and that is why, Father, I've said earlier, that while you're talking about drugs, and indeed you'll be talking about arms, these are just triggers. There are fundamental causes of this problem. And until and unless we begin to address those fundamentals, for instance, infrastructures are decaying, right? Across Benue you travel, you see infrastructures are decaying. And indeed, not only Benue, across the country, infrastructures are decaying. And security agencies cannot access these communities with decayed infrastructures. If you go to Maiduguri, one of the strategies of the terrorists is that they destroy bridges. It's indicative of the fact that the best way to confront this thing is to make these people accessible, so that even if security is not forthcoming, let them be able to escape, right? So there are things that are important. You need to empower, capacitate the communities. Apart from capacitating individuals, the communities themselves need to be capacitated. And so you ask of research, what I see when I go out on research, and the findings that I see from not only the research that I conduct, but research that I see people conduct, is that what is sustaining these conflicts is that we have not been able to respond to basic socio-economic challenges that our communities are confronted with.
Failure to respond to basic challenges. Let's quickly tidy up the side stories. Excuse me. So, still on terrorism, banditry, kidnapping, and other violent crimes. This one says 1 killed, 6 abducted in Katsina bandits attack. That's according to the Daily Trust. In the Daily Post of yesterday, we have this headline: gunmen attack Celestial Church during vigil, abduct 2 in Ogun. Interestingly, those 2 happen to be the pastors. From the Punch newspaper yesterday, gunmen kidnap Christian Association of Nigeria chairman in Plateau State. And another headline says, abducted bishop, wife, driver regain freedom. That's in the Punch newspaper. The Anglican Bishop of Jeba dies in Kwara State, Right Reverend Oluwaseun Aderoba, his wife and driver, who were kidnapped by gunmen on Sunday night, have been released. The kidnappers had reportedly demanded a ransom of about 50 million naira. We do not know whether the demand was met before they are released, but they have been released. And you will see that some of these abductions that we are mentioning in our side stories have targeted Christian religious leaders, and that is bound to create some narrative, isn't it?
On high demand.
Yes. Then we have this story that says 7 children disappear in Taraba community. Punch newspaper. And children again. Another says pirates abduct 8 passengers on Bayelsa waterway. That's in the Daily Trust. So the airports are a challenge now, the roads are a challenge now, waterways are beginning to come into the whole mix. And lastly, Great luck as hoodlums attempt attack on Abuja IDP's camp in the Daily Trust. Well, there was palpable tension yesterday among residents and motorists around area 1 axis of Abuja when some hoodlums reportedly attempted to attack an internally displaced persons camp located in Durumi, but operatives of the Nigeria Police Force stationed at Area 1 roundabout swiftly repaired the attempted attack. The incident caused quite some gridlock in the axis, with many left in fear. So, Chiedu,
Yeah.
those are the side stories.
Thanks. I mean, if one can see easily that no access, no transport channel, no, like you said, no community in Nigeria is safe. Cities, rural communities, even forests are all occupied by what we call the bandits or terrorists. I mean, it still boils down to what do we do with the intelligence we have. The incident in Benue and then the intelligence report shows that something can be done with intelligence to actually make life better for Nigerians. Listeners, I will be taking a short break, and then when we come back, we'll begin our discussion on herders and farmers' conflict in Nigeria in earnest. Stay with us. Yeah, thank you for staying tuned to Radio Maria 91.3 FM. You have been listening to Side by Side. Now we shall begin our discussion on herders and farmers' conflict in Nigeria in earnest. Once more, we have our guest, Dr. Paul Gwaza, with us. We've had some side facts earlier on. Father Robert, you still take us through some more side facts about the herders and farmers conflict. Father Robert, please.
Yes, I think I have to do this because I am both a header and a farmer.
Yeah, but
Do
add all that tax?
I am a spiritual header. I am a shepherd. I'm a pastor.
Okay. That's what that qualification.
Okay, so here are some side facts about the herders and farmers conflict in Nigeria. For many years, communities in Nigeria have been convulsed by herder-farmer conflict. Many clashes in this conflict have been deadly, resulting in the loss of lives, livelihoods, and poverty, with many people displaced from their homes and forced to live in internally displaced persons camps, the ones we call IDP camps. The actors are mostly Muslim Fulani herders and Christian non-Fulani farmers. And the narratives about the conflict are usually framed according
transformation that's transformed, as well as several other conflict typology in the country have also been, taking a new perspective or taking a new future in recent times. The reason why they have taken a new future is because of the global narrative of conflict in recent times, especially for Western scholars. They will tell you post September 11. For African scholars will tell you that indeed there are dimension in post-Cold War era in terms of understanding of conflict. Now, that will help states to provide, number one, to be able to think through policy and to provide a sustainable solution to this problem. Now, if you look at what is happening in southern Kaduna and what the father has described in the side stories, you listen to the attack that is taking place across the country, and the narrative is that these are these are herders. You hear Fulani herders, you hear unknown gunmen. The issue is that unless we are able to categorize that these are terror events, these are terrorists carrying out terror events, and the state responds to issues of terror, then we will not be able to address the problem, because the antics of the terrorists is to flag up ethnicity, to flag up religion, and so you then decloud or color it with some ethnic and religious narrative, and by so doing they will continue to achieve the purpose for terror. The purpose for terror is to instill fear in the mind of citizens, to scare people, and to score political objectives. And so, over this period that you have mentioned, you discover that we have been dealing with this thing as if it is a farmer-herder clash. Whereas the reality is that this is terror that we are dealing with. It's terrorists that are carrying out nefarious activities. We give them several names. We call them bandits. We call them insurgents. And in a bid to be politically correct, we even call them herders. Some people call them unknown gunmen. But these are pure terror. They are terrorist organizations at times, or terror individual. And a terrorist can go to a community because of a certain beliefs and then unleash terror on a society, on a group of people. And so within the context of what terror organization, and it is important for the state, for the individuals, for groups within the society, we profile these organized attack on Nigerian community as a terrorism. Then we'll be singing this discordant tune. Some people will say Fulanis have attacked our community. Some will say this community. So some people will begin to say that Fulanis are trying to take over. There is a jihadist agenda, all these things. But if we collectively, with the state, both local, state, and the federal government, and the citizens, both Muslims and Christians, look at this as a terror project or terror operation, and we are collectively fight this terror. Look at the root cause of terror. Address the sustaining factor. But if we think that this farmer herder that we're dealing with, then I tell you that we will not be able to address it.
Yeah, I mean, from what you've said, it's like it's a false flag. Deliberately or inadvertently, we have failed to actually capture this threat or this phenomenon for what it is, terror. There seems to be no agreement or common agreement as who are our common enemies. That's what it is, basically. So, Pedas is actually trying to say, while you were talking, now you say something again. Yeah, this development appears to also, when you try to dimension it, it takes a religious dimension here, takes ethnic dimension here. So what then happens is that the state and the people are unable to come together and frontally identify this and then agree on a common solution to it. Now,
he was suggesting that maybe taking those different narratives serves a purpose, doesn't it?
The purpose of terror, right?
No, I mean, okay.
Serves the purpose. Which means we're not focused on a particular target.
Yeah,
That's what it means.
It is the antics of the terrorists
Yes.
to do that. So
Yeah.
once they begin to give you this narrative, you are busy confronting this narrative, and they are achieving their aim. Yeah, so it is, and you know they are building on existing discussion in the country. This divisive discussion. We have this divisive discussion has been on since independence about the North-South, about the Christian, and even when Reverend was reading out the narrative, the population dimension, even the farmers are mainly Christians and indigenous, and that herders are mainly Muslims and Fulanis. But even though he corrected adjectives.
Yeah. Now, while we're listening to the side facts, the environmental angle was brought in. Yeah. The global phenomenon we're facing now, that is environmental degradation and the rest of them. Now, some people try to excuse the actions of these terrorists. Let me use the word terrorists, and that's what they are. Excuse the action that, yes, environmental degradation is actually needed of direct lives. Now, talking about impact, what's your take on its impact on national cohesion, national security, development, and then even relationship with our foreign, with other nations and within?
On the push and pull factor before our response, that if even with internet, there are certain states that, for instance, Lagos State, and say you take some states that are interior, that are not rich economically as Lagos State, not because of those factors, but terror is that it's inviting because there's a larger population here also. Once you detonate a bomb in, say, Abuja, for instance, like we take the Nyanya incidents, whoever is your sponsor will be happy that you have committed more terror activity, you have sent more signal to whoever the target is than in a densely populated, in a less densely populated area, say for instance in Sahel, where there is less number of people. Right, there's high population in terms of the impact of your activity. If you want to also returns, there's high returns here, and we seems to have a weaker institutions to hold these people accountable for acts, and we have seen it in big copies all over the place. The terror, in terms of the activities of terrorists in the society. If you compare it to the number of people that have been arrested or the number of people that have been sentenced, you discover that the number does not add up at all.
Well, Dr. Paul, I was going to say that yes, it's useful to call culprits in this conflict involving herders and farmers terrorists. But one of the challenges that poses, especially for media work like ours, is our listeners now lose. So can we call and farmers? The truth also is that groups like
while you are trying to resolve the conflict, maybe community leaders of the Fulani within that community and the herding community, and the farming community are trying to amicably, which they have been doing over centuries anyway. Whether in the Benue Valley, or even in the far north, or even in the southern Nigeria, there are cases where farmers and herding and farming communities will always have this problem. And while they're trying to resolve this problem, the point is that the larger component, because we have allowed terrorists to spread over the country, while they're trying to resolve this conflict, terror organization will then hear of this thing and come and unleash mayhem on the community. Now, it is also the same thing, not only in the farmer-herder discussion, so that our listeners will understand the context of these conflict dynamics in the country. Whether it is even election, like that we're about entering into election, it could merely be about APC and PDP differences and then because already the environment itself has been taken over by terror activity, the tendency is that immediately this thing is happening, terror group will take over. Let's take the case of what happened in Sokoto. It would have been a mere misunderstanding between students that you abuse my deity, which I think is blasphemy. Kindly apologize, or please apologize. And some terror group have heard of this thing that this guy is saying, apologize for taking over by terror narrative. And there are people waiting at the side to unleash terror on the society. They then avail themselves of this. I mean, they take advantage of this occasion to unleash terror. And you understood what happened in Sokoto. Even after what happened in the school, they went about, the city, destroying properties and killing people, right? Yeah. So the point I'm making further is that yes, there is the farmer-harder disagreement. Let me categorize it that way. Disagreement that has been taking place and is still taking place up to now, where there is a strain, where farmers have farmed on the cattle routes, is still taking place, and which is what Magban has been harping on. So the point is that unless and until we're able to properly profile these discussion, these strands of conflict, we will not be able to address it properly. So you hear solution that ordinarily ought to be for farmer-harder being brought to responding to terrorism. Solutions that ordinarily should respond to terrorism, we want to employ it to the farmer-harder conflict. So my point is that we must be able to know that. And the woman just lifted her hijab, and under the hijab is AK-47, and the doctor just fainted immediately, right? So the point is that it is everybody seems to be, people now bear arms, women bear arms. You hear even our leaders telling us, even after the Benue attack, the governor said, defend yourself. And if the essay to the governor is saying that these people came with AK-47, that even vigilante cannot confront them, defending yourself means getting a superior weapons than because I can't imagine defending myself with a stick, right? You have to defend yourself with a superior weapon. So armed robbers came to my house, and they came with something that these arms are all over the place, and criminals are using it. The other day, the narrative is that there is a problem with is from Libya, but I think the Libyan arms, if at all there are any, would have been exhausted by now. The weapons, if you see what the media is churning out in terms of the reports from the security agencies, you know that it's beyond the Libya arms. There are people that are.
Yeah. Amen. Thank you, Samuel. Yeah. Defending yourself. Hello. We have another caller. Hello. Hello. Yeah. Good morning. Yeah. Thanks for calling in. Let's have your name and where you're calling from. Bello. Bello from Abuja. Bello. Thank you. Okay, David. David, thanks for calling in. Let's have your contribution.
David, you made a very serious claim there, and I don't believe you have enough evidence to back that up. All right. So when you have evidence, what you usually do is you go to law enforcement and lodge it. You know that if you allege, yeah, but that's different from saying the governor is behind it. Okay. Okay, let me tell you what you can do in a situation like that, okay? Your community, do you have a traditional ruler? Do you have a youth leader? Do you have religious leaders there? Good. Now, they can mobilize, come together, and then go pay a visit to the state government and tell them there was a security challenge of this nature. These are the actions they took, and they are expecting something out of it. You understand? Issues like this are usually pursued as a group, not merely as individuals. But your community leaders can mobilize and then pay attention to the a visit to the state governor and have a discussion, and something will come out of it. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Yeah. Another caller. Good morning. Yes, thank you for calling in. What's the name? Okay, Gabriel from Kubwa. Thanks. Let's have your contribution.
All right. I would like to say something as in the connection with the Benue community. Hello?
Yes.
Hello, yeah, Gabriel, go on.
Can you step away from your radio?
No, I'm not here for my radio.
Okay.
It's just very unfortunate in our country that the security, in fact, there is no more intelligence gathering in our country. Let me tell us one of them. You know, the other person mentioned something like, it's as if the government is supporting these people, and we are seeing evidence or seeing things or hearing things now that we have to start believing something. Let me tell us what happened. Just here in Kubo, I live in Kubo. Just Friday, one of the victims that was kidnapped, that stayed in kidnappers then for 44 days. He was a student schooling in Kaduna, and after all up and down, the parents were able to pay the kidnappers, and the ransom was secured. When he came back from the victory, now this is what he told us in the church on our normal Friday program. He told us that these bandits at night, you see helicopters coming to supply them open water and food and everything that they need. So hearing things like this, you begin to wonder, are we actually calling these people unknown? Because this helicopter is coming to supply food to the so-called kidnappers. What are we to say? Rather than I say the government has a hand in it. What it goes now with our trust is because the security is gone, the leadership has failed us. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Yeah, Dr. Baza, you had that helicopter at night, government involved. Do this helicopter, do they land in airfields? Okay, sorry, you have another caller coming in. Yeah, hello. Good morning. Yes, thanks for calling. What's the name and where are you calling from? Oh, David from Logogoma.
David, how are you doing?
Aha, David.
Good to hear from you. Please go ahead.
All right. Yeah, thank you, David, for your contribution. Law enforcement agency should step up their game. Yes. Okay.
Dr. Paul, there was talk about what was it again, about self-defense. You know, when you hear self-defense, all kinds of things come to mind. And I was hoping that you can very briefly order our thoughts around